going, everybody? So with the release of Inside Out 2, we now have 28 Pixar films to rank from worst to best. Now, I have been growing up watching Pixar my entire life, ever since that first Toy Story came out when I was a little kid, and ever since then, I always look forward to Pixar films to some degree. But of course, it's just my personal rankings. Share your rankings down below, how you'd rank every Pixar film from worst to best. Without further ado, though, let's get right into my last place pick. Coming in last place, I have The Good Dinosaur. Each and every time I do these rankings, I rewatch these movies, and every single time with The Good Dinosaur, I try to find new things to appreciate about it, but for the most part, every time I rewatch it, I just think it's just okay. I've never thought the movie overall was terrible or anything, but it's just lackluster when you compare it to a lot of the library of Pixar. The story surrounding it, attempts at these big emotional punches, none of that stuff resonates to me compared to a lot of Pixar films. At number 27, I have Brave. This is an interesting one when talking about Brave, because the sum of its parts showcases a lot of potential, especially the all-around story elements here. Personally, I've always had a hard time connecting with Brave every single time I've watched it. Merida at points has flashes of cool moments throughout her journey, and out of a lot of the other Pixar films, I just don't watch it as often, and I've always found it baffling that it won Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. At number 26, I have Cars 2. Every time I do a Pixar ranking, I feel so bad because I know I genuinely upset the Cars fans, because I usually rank the Cars films a lot lower than most of them would expect, though Cars 2 probably is the worst offender out of the 3 films in the franchise. Because what an odd decision centering your spy story, the sequel, around Mater. I mean, it definitely has its moments of charm throughout, as some of the cast does still have some fun sequences, but all around, I've just never found myself enjoying the Cars franchise overall. At number 25, I have Cars 3. The major silver lining, though, going from Cars 2 to Cars 3, is the fact that they did put the spotlight back on Lightning McQueen as the main central character, on top of just focusing on going back to racing in general, which really helps this entry excel despite a story that borders on being a tad too predictable. Nevertheless, it is a massive improvement in basically every category from Cars 2. At number 24, I have Lightyear. I gotta give him credit for trying to do something out of the box here to expand upon the Toy Story franchise, albeit this idea is kind of an odd choice. There definitely are flashes where it's this awesome sci-fi centric adventure, some of Pixar's best VFX work to date. Then there are other moments where it kind of devolves into generic territory. I actually didn't mind Chris Evans voicing Buzz Lightyear in this interpretation of the character. However, I do think compared to the 4 Toy Story films, this is a major step down for this franchise. At number 23, I have Onward. Compared to a lot of the more recent Pixar outings, I do have a lot of respect for Onward conceptually. As I am a huge fan of the fantasy genre, these elements did appeal to me a lot. I do wish that I liked the story overall and connected to it a little bit more. The journey with these two brothers is just very all over the place. And I found it kind of hard to connect with the characters, despite both Chris Pratt and Tom Holland having very good chemistry together. At number 22, I have Finding Dory. For as much as I love Finding Nemo, Finding Dory as a sequel, it's okay. It's fine. It's your quintessential safe follow-up sequel. I mean, sure, I like Dory a whole lot in Finding Nemo, so why not have an interesting little Dory-centered adventure? It's a type of sequel that doesn't reach anywhere near the highs, excitement-wise, or pulls on your heartstrings like a Finding Nemo did. It's just a textbook example of a serviceable enough sequel. At number 21, I have A Bug's Life. Being someone that was old enough to remember A Bug's Life growing up, I didn't connect to it as much as a kid compared to a lot of the other early Pixar films. Gradually, as I've gotten older and rewatched it a bit more, despite the fact I still think it's one of the early Pixar films that has aged the worst, as far as the visuals are concerned, the story does manage to draw you in. The overall messaging within it continues to still be quite poignant, surprisingly to this day. And it's also awkward looking back that Hopper is probably one of the top tier antagonists of Pixar in terms of scare factor performance-wise, and also looking back at the fact that it's performed by Kevin Spacey. As I've gotten older, I think I've liked this film a little bit more each time I've rewatched it. Coming in at number 20, I have Monsters University. My feelings towards Monsters University is kind of similar in a way to Finding Dory. I of course love Monsters Inc., so I'm obviously going to get a certain level of enjoyment recapturing some of that charm, seeing these characters in in college. It very much gives off the vibes of Revenge of the Nerds meets Pixar, and that's something I found so endearing about watching the film. Because it is a prequel, the stakes are quite low. It still doesn't keep me from having a fun time watching it from time to time. At number 19, I have Elemental. Seeing as this was being billed as the first ever Pixar rom-com, I had high expectations going into it, and I do wish it was executed a little bit better. The leads do have quite a bit of chemistry, on top of some insanely gorgeous visuals. I just wish a lot of the story revolving around those characters and the themes were a bit better executed. A lot of that stuff was fairly messy, so it's a very middle of the road kind of experience for me. At number 18, I have Cars. This still might be on the lower side for some people, but I do genuinely get a lot of fun out of the very first Cars film. The charm really shines through brightest amongst the multitude of characters in this entry, between the exciting racing sequences, and to me, no matter what in this franchise, Lightning McQueen is the true GOAT. At number 17, I have WALL-E. This is a Pixar film that it did take me a little bit of time to appreciate more, because for the longest time, I really didn't like WALL-E all that much. Compared to many Pixar films, the uniqueness of how it chooses to execute everything down to WALL-E being the lead adds a lot of charm to watching this. I must admit though, it's always tough rewatching it because the first half of the movie I don't think is as good as the second half. At number 16, I have Luca, one of the several Pixar films that went straight to Disney Plus, which is a shame because I love so much about Luca. I've always found it to be such an endearing delight. You can't go wrong with a charming, fun adventure built around a budding friendship with great messaging at its core. I'm also really glad that they finally did release all of these movies that went straight to Disney Plus in theaters, because I do think this was a much better experience watching it on the big screen. At number 15, I have Turning Red. For as much flack as Turning Red got, I genuinely had a pretty fun time with it. It's an interesting spin on a coming-of-age style tale revolving around puberty. Admittedly, it does play into my nostalgia a little bit, growing up in that era as a kid during that time when there was boy bands going crazy. But overall, it's just a cute, lighthearted romp, and I'm still patiently waiting for a 4-town tour. At number 14, I have Incredibles 2. For as long as we had to wait to finally get a sequel to The Incredibles, 14 years to be exact, I do think the wait was relatively worth it, as I do think overall it was a pretty solid follow-up film. Many of the elements that made that original film so good are still here, particularly the fun, charming dynamic amongst this family tackling another adventure. The story and villain isn't as good as that original Incredibles. For the most part, like I said, it's a solid follow-up. At number 13, I have Up. This is definitely one of the Pixar films that tugs on your heartstrings the hardest. Yet despite so much emotional heft in Up, overall had a great time with the journey that we go on with these characters. But I will admit it is a lot sadder now rewatching Up after Ed Asner passed away. At number 12, I have Soul. This Pixar film always catches me by surprise, as it does delve into more deeper, mature material than we're used to, in particular revolving around life itself, which for sure can be a bit jarring for kids, but I think it resonates a lot deeper with adults. And due to that, this adventure, while it is enjoyable, it just cuts so much deeper. Similar with Turning Red and Luca, it was great to get to finally see this in theaters after all these years. Apparently, I was one of the only few people that watched these movies in theaters because they did not do well if you look at the box office. At number 11, I have Inside Out 2. Such an awesome follow-up to the original Inside Out. It does exactly everything that you want in a follow-up film, expanding upon those themes from the original, packing on so much emotion, taking us on yet another intriguing journey through Riley's emotions becoming a teenager. It's packed with so much heart and great funny sequences, with a good mix of old characters and new emotions. So as far as Pixar sequels go, I do think Inside Out 2 is one of the better ones. At number 10, I have Toy Story 4. I still remember when they announced that Toy Story 4 was going to happen and thinking that was a horrible idea. Toy Story 3 was the perfect conclusion, but the film still managed to win me over by the end. There's certainly a ton of things to love in Toy Story 4 when it comes to the humor category, all-around engaging narrative, and some great new additions to the cast as well, like Forky and Duke Kaboom. The true standout that made this movie worthwhile to me was the journey that we went on with Woody as a character. Everything surrounding Woody's story in this was so touching. Obviously now we do know that a Toy Story 5 is coming, so because of how much I was skeptical about Toy Story 4, I guess I have to be optimistic that Toy Story 5 is going to be worth it as well. At number 9, I have Ratatouille. As somebody that considers themselves kind of a foodie, that probably is part of why I love this movie so much. It's definitely a strange concept for a Pixar film, but it still excels in all facets, crafting this engaging narrative around the concept of pursuing your your passions, even if pursuing your passions means teaming up with the rat, you know, the usual. At number 8, I have Inside Out. When it comes to the first Inside Out, no pun intended, but it just hits on all the right emotions. Executing this fun concept, visualizing the emotions inside of us, giving them each their own interesting, unique personality sets. Overall, the ensemble cast is perfect. I love the themes all around within this adventure. At number 7, I have Monsters, Inc. To this day, I think that Monsters, Inc. has one of the coolest concepts amongst many of the Pixar films. Crafting a story revolving around a corporation where monsters' entire jobs is to scare kids, yet still managing to keep everything lighthearted. And that's all thanks to the usual Pixar magic and these great cast of characters. There are a lot of iconic duos in Pixar, but Mike and Sully definitely has to be one of my favorites. And on top of that, you throw in this story revolving around Boo, which also gets some big laughs on top of some big emotions. Movies like this and Inside Out are part of why Pete Docter probably is my favorite amongst all the different Pixar directors. At number 6, I have Toy Story 2. Some of my love for this movie definitely could be attributed to nostalgia growing up with it, but I just love everything about this sequel. It has a simpleness to the all-around story that works perfectly to further develop these characters from the original, while managing to add in some other fantastic new characters to the bunch. Both of the adventures that we switch back and forth between in Toy Story 2 managed to be strong. The Pixar magic is full force in this sequel, while managing to completely crush my heart when we get these flashback sequences getting to see Jesse's origin story. At number 5, I have Finding Nemo. This movie is still gorgeous to this day. It's packed to the brim with so many memorable characters, moments, and quotable lines of dialogue. To be honest, probably out of all the top 5, this movie and probably the first Toy Story are the ones that I quote the most. I also think the messaging across the board in this is one of Pixar's best, because depending on what age you are, I think you can take away different lessons, whether you're watching this as a kid or you're watching this as an adult, potentially with kids. At number 4, I have Toy Story 3. Obviously, we know now this isn't the end of the Toy Story franchise, but still nevertheless, Toy Story 3 is a perfect conclusion to the Toy Story trilogy. You can tell that they put their all into making this a grand emotional experience for all of those who grew up with these characters. Stakes are high, which makes this experience all the more entertaining. I must admit, Lotso is probably one of my favorite Pixar villains. Surprise reveal that he was the villain was one that got me. Unfortunately, kind of started this trend for a while where a lot of Disney films had these secret villains. Much like any effective Toy Story film, there are a multitude of moments that pull on your heartstrings, though arguably Toy Story 3 probably has some of the biggest. On top of the big farewell where Andy passes off all of his toys to Bonnie and says farewell. For a while there, it did feel like it was a farewell to these characters. And then we got Toy Story 4 and soon to be Toy Story 5. Like I said though, nevertheless, perfect end of the trilogy. Coming in at number 3, I have Coco. Out of all of the various Pixar films that are new ideas lately that aren't sequels to anything, and don't quote me if I come back in a couple of years and there's a Coco 2, I do think Coco is the best out of the bunch. I find so many things about Coco to be so special and hit close to home for me. There are a wide array of details in this that I think are just pure perfection. The breathtaking visuals across the adventure of the afterlife with Hector and Miguel. The music is top notch. The story is beautifully weaved and packs on a real emotional punch, subject matter wise, revolving around family and death. Ernesto de la Cruz as the villain, I think he is probably one of the most despicable villains in Pixar history. One of the rare examples of a Pixar villain that actually kills somebody. For me at least, out of all the different moments in Pixar history, the most soul-crushing, tear-jerking moment to me is when Miguel sings Remember Me to Mama Coco. I pretty much can never watch that scene without crying a little bit. It's just that emotional. Coming in at number 2, I have The Incredibles. How can I be a huge fan of superhero movies and not absolutely love everything about The Incredibles? It's a film that delivers on some of the best all-around thrills of any Pixar film. Best of all, the family dynamic of The Incredibles adds so many great layers to the story, along with each of them just having very cool powers, which in turn creates some thrilling, cool action set pieces when they have to work together to stop Syndrome. Brad Bird, I mean, he completely killed it with this film. Not just directing, but voicing Edna Mode too, because Edna Mode is the true icon of the Incredibles franchise. Coming in at number 1, I have Toy Story. No matter how many times I rewatch this first Toy Story, I think it's just a borderline masterpiece. I adore every single little thing about Toy Story. It's the perfect animated adventure that is filled with so much charm and ambition. Still, after all these years, so much about the movie holds up story-wise and its themes. Most of all, the dynamic between Buzz Lightyear and Woody. I mean, it's easy easy to see why these characters became instant icons and truly set in motion the Pixar formula, where for many Pixar films following this, we would have these iconic duos. It's one of those big comfort movies that no matter what, every single time I watch it, I can have a great time and a big smile on my face. It's just a perfect film. But there you have it. That is my ranking of all of the Pixar films from worst to best, all 28 of them. I had a blast talking Pixar on the channel with you guys once again. And as I said before, make sure you share your rankings down below. I'd love to know all of your rankings, how you'd rank the films from worst to best, because the fun of this is seeing all of your rankings, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of variety how you'd rank these movies. I'm really curious, so share your rankings down below. Thank you guys, as always, checking out videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure you like on the video and also subscribe to the channel to update reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. Till next time, I'll see you guys later.